Sophie was helping Max with a puzzle in her new job as a nanny when a cold voice broke the moment. She looked up and saw Ethan Caldwell standing at the living room door, his posture stiff, his expression firm. "I need to talk to you alone," he said. Sophie looked up, still holding a giraffe-shaped puzzle piece. "Is something wrong with Max?" "No, it's about tonight," Ethan replied. "You're coming with me to the company party." She blinked, confused. "Sorry, what?" Ethan crossed his arms. "You're going with me to the gala. Wear something appropriate." Sophie stood up quickly, still trying to understand what he had just said. "I'm sorry, Mr. Caldwell, but I was hired as a nanny, not to attend social events. Tonight, you'll be both. The person who was supposed to go canceled last minute. I need someone. You're here. Problem solved." She raised an eyebrow. "That's not in the contract." "It is now," he said, turning on his heel as if the matter was closed. "Hold on." Sophie followed him into the hallway. "You really think you can just call me up like you're ordering a pizza?" Ethan turned slowly, his face unreadable. "I pay well. I already arranged someone to take care of Max tonight, and I hired a stylist for you. Dress, hair, everything." Sophie crossed her arms, not backing down. "Something wrong with my hair?" He took a deep breath, staying calm. "What's already nice can be even better." She scoffed, arrogant. "Be ready by 8 p.m., don't be late," and he left. Sophie stood alone in the hallway, heart racing, eyes on the door that had just closed. She walked back to the living room, where Max was watching her curiously, holding a puzzle piece. "You're going out with Dad?" She took a deep breath. "Looks like it, buddy. But what about our dinosaur?" "He'll have to wait tonight. I'll be kind of like a princess." Max smiled, not really understanding. Sophie sat back down on the rug, trying to act calm, but inside she was burning up. Ethan Caldwell thought he could control everything and everyone, and maybe he could, but she wasn't going to just follow orders. If she was going to that dinner, it would be on her terms to show him and the world that she was more than just a nanny with a messy resume and an unfinished degree. At 7:05 p.m., the stylist arrived. She was a short, cheerful woman named Ava, who walked in like she was on a secret mission, carrying a rack full of red carpet-worthy dresses. "Miss Sophie, let's bring out your beauty." "I love working with raw, authentic material." "Raw material?" Sophie raised an eyebrow. "In a good way, dear. You're beautiful. You just need a little help." With some hesitation, Sophie let Ava take over. The makeover included soft makeup, a simple updo with loose waves falling on her shoulders, and a flowing red dress with a classy cut that highlighted her slim waist and well-shaped shoulders. When she looked in the mirror, she barely recognized herself, not because she looked like someone else, but because, for the first time in a long while, she saw something she hadn't allowed herself to see. Her best version. At 7:58 p.m., she walked down the mansion stairs, calm and composed. Ethan was waiting in the foyer, adjusting his tie. When he saw her, he froze. He didn't say anything at first, which, coming from him, was almost poetic. His eyes took in the dress, the hair, the simple earrings. Then he looked into her eyes. There was surprise and maybe admiration. "You look acceptable," he said, clearing his throat. Sophie smiled, tilting her head slightly. "Not too bad for someone you hired as a nanny, huh?" Ethan ignored the comment and held out his arm. She took it, a bit sarcastically. "I'm going for me, just so you know." "Fine, as long as you smile in the photos and don't spill wine on anyone. Your reasons are your own." As the front door opened and the car waited outside, Sophie's stomach turned. It was just one night, a show, a performance, but something inside her said things would never be the same again. The ballroom at the Crestwood Hotel sparkled with gold and crystal. It was the night of the annual Caldwell Enterprises event, where numbers were discussed behind toasts and appearances mattered just as much as contracts. Ethan walked in with Sophie at his side, and for a brief moment, the noise in the room seemed to stop. She was there in a striking red, light fabric dress that fit her naturally without overdoing it. Her bare shoulders showed perfect posture. Her hair in loose, soft waves moved slightly in the air conditioning. There were no flashy jewels or heavy makeup, just pure elegance. The first to notice the two of them was Victoria Langley, Ethan's ex-fiancée, from one of Chicago's most traditional families. She was standing with two company executives when she slowly turned, as if sensing the moment. Her eyes froze on the red dress. "Oh," Victoria gave a sideways smile. "Did you bring a date tonight?" Ethan replied with just a curt nod. Sophie stood firm at his side, a slight smile on her lips, not broad, not shy, just confident. The smile of someone who didn't need to prove anything. "Hello," Sophie extended her hand politely. "Sophie Rivera." Victoria shook her hand with 2 fingers, as if handling something delicate. "Charmed. We hadn't met yet." "Interesting color choice." Her gaze moved over the dress. "Red is bold, very noticeable." "That's right," Sophie smiled. "Being invisible never really appealed to me." Victoria forced a muffled laugh. "And do you work at Caldwell Enterprises?" "Something like that," Sophie answered in a neutral tone. "Interesting." Victoria turned to the men around her. "Lately, the company has been adopting some rather creative inclusion policies." Ethan cleared his throat. "Victoria, if you're implying something—" "Oh, of course not," she shot back, smiling. "I'm just saying it's admirable to see the company investing in alternative talent." Sophie stepped forward slightly, tilting her head just a bit. "You know, I really admire women like you." "Really?" Victoria seemed caught off guard. "Of course. It takes courage to wear a dress with so many layers and still walk as if you're floating. And keeping your balance in those heels? That's an art." Victoria couldn't quite tell if that was a compliment or a dig, and that was exactly the effect Sophie wanted. Ethan looked at her in surprise that had been elegant, clever, and oddly fun. In the minutes that followed, many eyes turned their way as they walked toward the main table. Sophie kept her posture straight, greeting people with polite ease but no fuss. There was something about her, a mix of simplicity and confidence that was intriguing. "Are you all right?" Ethan asked under his breath as they settled at the table. "I'm great," she replied calmly, picking up her napkin. "By the way, you should smile more. Your face looks friendlier when it's not frozen." He raised an eyebrow. "You know you're talking to the company president, right? And you know you're talking to someone who isn't afraid of presidents, right?" Ethan didn't answer, but the corner of his mouth threatened a smile. Dinner was served in courses. Sophie stayed observant, watching the guests' movements. Every detail seemed rehearsed: laughter, toasts, the exchange of cards. It was corporate theater, and she surprisingly seemed to understand the script. By the second glass of sparkling wine, Victoria reappeared, this time with an elegant gentleman at her side. "Ethan, dear," she said with a sparkle in her eye. "This is Mr. Mystère Dubois, one of our French investors in green energy. He wanted to meet your guest. Miss Rivera." The man extended his hand. "A pleasure. We were just saying how your presence has been notable." Sophie shook his hand firmly. "Very kind. It's a pleasure as well. Do you work in development?" Ethan opened his mouth to correct him, but Sophie was quicker. "I've been following some of the company's social projects, especially those focused on accessibility. I believe technology is only progress if it includes people, not excludes them." Dubois looked at her with genuine interest. "Very well put." Victoria pursed her lips slightly. Dubois smiled. "In Paris, for example, there are community solar energy models that don't just supply power, but also train local residents to manage the systems. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Lumiere project data." Dubois looked visibly impressed. "Yes, of course. It's one of our pilot projects. I think it's fascinating. I read last quarter's report. The impact curve is promising." Ethan watched her, surprised. He had no idea she read reports. "Miss Rivera," Dubois said, "would you be open to scheduling a meeting? I'd be curious to hear your ideas." Sophie nodded, still smiling. "I'd be happy to." When he walked away, Victoria stayed silent for a few seconds. "Wow," she finally said, "you really are full of surprises." "You learn fast when you pay attention," Sophie said, "and I pay close attention." Victoria forced a smile and stepped back, disappearing into the crowd. Ethan turned to Sophie, still processing what he had just seen. "Where did you learn about community energy?" "I haven't been a nanny my whole life, Mr. Caldwell. I had plans before I had to reinvent myself. Reinvention. Surviving takes creativity." He stayed quiet for a few seconds. "You made a good impression. I'm glad. I'm not here to make a bad one. Dubois actually thought you were an executive. Maybe one day I will be. Who knows?" Ethan held his wine glass, watching her carefully. "What else do you know that you haven't shared?" She looked at him with a spark in her eyes. "That you'll have to find out." The morning after the event, Ethan Caldwell couldn't focus on anything. The financial report from the Seattle branch, ignored. A call from the legal director, postponed. Even his usual strong black coffee tasted off, all because of a woman in a red dress who was supposed to be just his son's nanny. Sophie had disrupted the smooth, predictable world he took so much pride in managing. He found her in the backyard, sitting with Max under a tree, drawing dinosaurs with colored chalk. Her hair was in a messy ponytail, she wore a loose blouse and jeans, but her presence was just like the night before, steady, confident, focused. "We need to talk," Ethan said, cutting into the moment like a fire alarm. Sophie stood up slowly. "Is this about the dinner?" "It's about the reaction to the dinner." He glanced at Max. "Can you give us a minute, champ?" Max pouted but ran inside with a handful of chalk. "What is it?" Sophie crossed her arms. "Last night, you made quite an impression, a positive one. All the investors were talking. Some even thought you were a new executive. It helped the company's image and mine, too." She raised an eyebrow. "Are you thanking me?" "Not exactly." He ran a hand through his hair. "I'm offering something, a deal that you keep pretending to be my girlfriend for the next 2 months. Sophie let out a short laugh. "You're kidding. I'm serious. We've got a lot of important business and social events coming up. My reputation in the companies would benefit if I were seen with someone like you. Someone like me? Smart, well-spoken, and already part of the act? By the way." She looked at him for a few seconds. "And what's in it for me?" "A generous bonus. And if you want, we can update your contract with new terms, so I'd have to dress like a magazine model, walk next to you smiling, and stay quiet when the rich folks in your world start talking nonsense. You're free to respond, as long as it's with class." "All right then." She stepped closer. "Here are my conditions. First, full autonomy with Max. I take care of him my way. Second, I dress how I want, whether it's for a party or coffee in the park. Third, no orders outside of what we agree on. And fourth, there's more. I get to decide when the act ends. If I feel it's time to stop before 2 months are up, that's it. No debate." Ethan hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Deal." "Great." She held out her hand. "We have ourselves a fake agreement." He shook it, and in that quick touch, something unspoken passed between them. In the weeks that followed, Sophie's presence in Ethan's life grew stronger, not just at business events. She was there when Max refused to eat his vegetables, when the neighbor's dog got into the yard, even when the house alarm went off by mistake at 4 the morning. Ethan found out Sophie made up songs on the spot to get Max to brush his teeth, that she danced around the kitchen when she thought no one was watching, that she read company reports, just out of curiosity, and left notes with suggestions that, to his surprise, actually made sense. "You know, this solves a problem our team hasn't been able to fix in 3 months, he said one evening, holding one of her notes. "It just takes a little common sense," she replied, sipping tea with bare feet up on the couch. "You all live in such a bubble, you forget how regular people think. Did you just call me out of touch?" Politely. "Thanks, I think." They looked at each other for a moment, then laughed like old friends, which clearly they weren't yet. The agreement between them included dinners, business lunches, magazine photo shoots, and even a yacht trip with European shareholders. Sophie always dressed elegantly in her own way, and stood out with her light and sharp sense of humor. She never tried to fit into that world, and that's exactly what made her shine in it. "Your girlfriend is fascinating," one of the investors said during a dinner. Ethan simply nodded, not sure how to respond. Later that night, while driving back with Sophie in the passenger seat, he said, "You got a lot of compliments. That's because I know when to smile and when to throw in a joke. The trick is making a provocation look like charm. You like to provoke, and you like to control, so we're even." But the real impact of Sophie's presence wasn't at the events, it was at home. Max started to change. He used to be shy and quiet, but now he talked more, smiled more. He asked questions, drew non-stop, and every morning he waited for Sophie with excitement. One evening, Ethan came home early and found the two of them under a blanket, watching cartoons with popcorn scattered across the couch. Max was asleep, his head resting on her lap. Ethan stood still, watching. Sophie made a quiet gesture, asking him not to wake the boy. He walked over, and almost without thinking, sat down beside her. They stayed there in silence for a few minutes, sharing the calm breath of a home finally at peace. "He's a lot happier," Ethan said softly. "He just needed real attention, time, patience, and someone who isn't always watching the clock." "Am I that someone who's always watching the clock?" "I didn't say that." She smiled. "But if you want a tip, try learning the names of his toys." Ethan looked at the dinosaur figure in his son's hands. That one's Green Dino. He's Milo, and he's blue, she whispered, laughing. Looks like I have a lot to learn. At least you admit it. The next morning, Max was drawing on the porch while Ethan read the newspaper. Sophie was in the kitchen, making pancakes. Daddy, can Sophie be my new mom? Ethan almost dropped his coffee cup. What? Max, with the most serious expression in the world, pointed to the drawing he had made him, Sophie, and Ethan holding hands with a smiling dog next to them. She tells me stories. She gives me baths without complaining. She makes me laugh, and she understands me, just like Mommy did. Ethan looked at the drawing, then at his son. That's not quite that simple, Max. But it would be nice, right? Ethan didn't know what to say. He just gently ruffled the boy's hair. Sophie appeared at the door with a spatula in her hand. What's going on? Nothing. Ethan stood up. Max is just imagining things. She noticed his expression but didn't push. Instead, she served breakfast with a calm smile. Imagination is one of the best things a child can have. Ethan didn't reply, but when he looked at the drawing again on the porch, he realized the boy wasn't the only one imagining things. He was too. That night, Ethan sat alone in his office, looking through photos from recent events. In every one of them, Sophie was at his side, smiling, talking, sometimes looking at him with that mix of challenge and sweetness he still couldn't quite figure out. The plan was to pretend, but it was getting harder and harder to remember what was pretend and what was real. The sky that Monday morning was overcast, like the weather knew something important was about to happen. Ethan was walking quickly through the halls of Caldwell Enterprises, phone pressed to his ear, nerves on edge. He had appendicitis today. Ethan's voice came out somewhere between shock and panic. On the other end, his assistant tried to calm him. Yes, sir. Lucas is already at the hospital, but unfortunately, he won't be able to attend the Horizon Project presentation to the International Investor Board. Ethan hung up without replying. The meeting was in 1 hour, and the Horizon Project, a bold plan for urban restructuring with a social focus, was a risky bet. It needed more than just numbers. It needed meaning. And now, without Lucas, their lead presenter, he had no spokesperson. He stepped into his office, unsure of what to do, and took a deep breath. That's when he heard footsteps behind him. Is everything okay? It was Sophie, carrying a folder with Max's drawings from the night before. No, Ethan replied plainly. Our lead executive for Horizon is out, and this presentation could decide a $20 million investment. Sophie was silent for a moment, then placed the drawings on the desk, brushed her hair back, and said, I can help. This isn't one of those moments where you offer to make tea, is it? No, she smiled. But if you want, I can do that too. What I'm saying is, you showed me the reports. We've talked about this project many times, and what it's missing is exactly what I can offer, which is humanity. She said it simply. The numbers are good, but the story behind them needs to be told by someone who understands people. Ethan watched her for a few seconds. You don't have experience giving presentations, and you don't have many options, remember? He smiled, one of those involuntary smiles that slip out before logic can stop them. Half an hour later, the investors began entering the room, big names, pressed ties, controlled smiles. These were the sharpest eyes in the sustainable urban development field. Ethan gave the introduction, brief and to the point, then handed the microphone to Sophie. She walked to the front of the room with the ease of someone who did it every day. She wore a beige blazer over a simple white blouse, and her hair was loose on her shoulders. Good morning. My name is Sophie Rivera, she began. I'm not an engineer, or an architect, or an economist, but I know exactly what it's like to grow up in a neighborhood where cracked sidewalks teach you to jump over holes before you even learn to read. The investors exchanged glances. This wasn't what they expected. The Horizon Project aims to turn forgotten neighborhoods into real communities with street lighting, green spaces, accessibility. But more than that, it aims to bring dignity. She clicked the remote, and a slide appeared, showing a rundown park. This place was the backyard of my childhood, where mothers took turns chasing away rats, where kids ran around in worn-out sandals but smiled like they owned the world. Today, it's abandoned, and that's why Horizon matters, because it brings back possibilities, because it plants seeds in neglected ground. Ethan watched from the side of the room, silent, fascinated. She continued, the project isn't just about renovating buildings. It's about building bridges between people and their rights, between children and their opportunities, and between companies and their real impact on society. At the end of the presentation, there was a brief silence. Then the French investor, the same one who had met Sophie at the party, raised his hand. "Miss Rivera, do you speak with such passion because you lived this?" "Yes," she answered firmly. "And that's why I believe numbers alone don't change reality. But people do." The room applauded. Ethan had never seen that happen in such a formal meeting. When it was over, and the investors left, talking among themselves, excited, Sophie turned to Ethan. "I think it worked." He just looked at her for a few seconds. "You didn't just save this presentation, you transformed it. I just told a real story. People miss that, you know." "Miss you?" he teased. "No." She smiled. "The truth." Ethan was quiet for a few seconds. Then he murmured, "Thank you. Always happy to help, as long as it's part of the deal, of course." They both laughed, and the mood between them grew lighter, almost warm. Later that same day, already at home, Sophie was picking up Max's toys when she got an email titled "Official Social Collaboration Proposal, Vita Plano Foundation." She clicked on it. It was an invitation to be the national spokesperson for a new education and community development program based in another city, Boston. The project was serious, well-structured, with support from universities and companies. The email praised her presentation earlier and said she'd been recommended by one of the investors present. Sophie sat in silence for a while. On the screen, the terms were clear: competitive salary, housing, visibility, and purpose. A lot of purpose. She closed the laptop slowly. Later that night, sitting with Max on the sofa, he looked at her with sleepy eyes. "Did you save Daddy's job today? Maybe just a little bit. Are you going to live here forever?" She swallowed hard. "I don't know, champ. If you go away, what will happen to us?" She hugged him tightly, feeling her heart ache. "I don't know yet, but I promise nothing really important will change." Max fell asleep in her arms, and Sophie stayed there, looking out the window while the city lights shone outside like opportunities that were finally starting to appear. The day seemed just like any other at Caldwell Enterprises, but up on that glass-walled 8th floor, with the air conditioner humming in the background, something had started to change. Ethan was sitting at his desk, staring at his laptop screen without really seeing it. The numbers in front of him made sense, but they no longer sparked the excitement they once did. All he could think about was Sophie, or rather, what she had done, not just for the company, but for Max, for him, and for herself. She walked into the room naturally, holding a mug of tea and a folder full of notes. No high heels, no tailored suit, just a simple light dress and white sneakers. Still, she carried a confidence he quietly admired. "Were you waiting for me?" she asked casually. "Technically, yes." Ethan pointed to the folder. "I need your opinion on this new social project. The board wants to expand into the countryside, and I'd like to hear what you think." She sat down without hesitation. "Okay, where's the catch?" "There is no catch," he said, half smiling. "Just genuine curiosity. That's rare, coming from you. I'm trying to get better, and I'm here to witness it." She smiled. They spent nearly an hour going through the documents, discussing ideas, and exploring possibilities. The mood between them was easy, but there was something else in the air, something unspoken but felt with every glance they shared. During a quiet pause, Ethan turned his eyes toward the window. "Do you think some people are just born to carry the weight of the world?" Sophie stopped flipping through the pages. I think some people are raised that way, and others learn because life gives them no choice. My father was like that," Ethan said softly. "I grew up hearing that weakness wasn't an option, that every mistake meant failure. From a young age, everything was about goals, performance, perfection. I couldn't even mess up blowing out birthday candles. That sounds suffocating." "It was," he sighed. "I never got to choose what I wanted to be, only what I was supposed to be. And even now, sometimes I find myself trying to please someone who's no longer around." Sophie looked at him gently. For the first time, he didn't seem like the cold, untouchable CEO everyone knew. He looked like a man tired of carrying his armor. "And your mom?" she asked. "She died when I was 10. She was different kind, patient. When she was gone, everything got tougher." She looked down, moved. After a moment, she said, "I lost my mom too. More recently, I had to give up my scholarship when she got sick. I took care of her until the end." "You had a scholarship?" "Yes, psychology, State University. I was going to be the first in my family to graduate, but when the illness came, my sister was still little. Someone had to hold everything together. You took all that on by yourself? I did. I worked as a cashier, waitress, nanny. I did whatever I could, and I never looked back. Ethan stayed silent for a moment. The kind of silence that comes from understanding. You're stronger than you look, and you're more fragile than you let on. She replied softly. They looked at each other, this time with no walls, no jokes, no games. The connection between them, built through looks and sarcasm, now had deeper roots: shared pain, resilience, the fact that, even though they came from different worlds, they both carried scars that shaped every step they took. Outside that bubble of honesty, someone else was watching with different eyes. Victoria Langley had been told by an assistant that Ethan's girlfriend had shown up at an official company event, and not just shown up, she spoke on behalf of the board and impressed investors. The discomfort was growing. Who is this woman? She asked her personal team. We're trying to gather more information. Her full name is Sophie Rivera. We have a previous address, records of her working as a nanny, caregiver, and store clerk, but very little in the official files. No college degree, just an old enrollment, state university, psychology, dropped out a few years ago, no diploma. Victoria folded her fingers together, thinking, I want more. Everything you can find. Records, photos, old files, anything that could expose her. You think she's pretending? I'm not sure, but I do know when someone is somewhere they don't belong. And if we don't find anything damaging, then we create a story. Sometimes, just planting the doubt is enough. The rest, society will take care of. Victoria stood and walked to the window of her penthouse. From up there, everything looked under control, just like it always had. But something about Sophie threw her off. She was charismatic, genuine, and worse, she was starting to win people over, including Ethan. Victoria wasn't going to be replaced, especially not by someone who, in her view, didn't even belong in the room. At the office, Ethan and Sophie were saying goodbye after a long day. He was carrying a folder, and she had a notebook filled with handwritten notes. Going to see Max now? He asked, opening the elevator door. Yes, she said. He wants to show me a chalk masterpiece. Get ready. He mixed dinosaurs with rockets. Creativity's alive and well in that house. They stepped into the elevator together, the comfortable silence between them a clear contrast to the early days of their working relationship. Now, it wasn't strange to share the space, until, just a few floors from the lobby, the elevator stopped. The lights flickered. Was that planned? Sophie asked, half laughing, half suspicious. Unfortunately, no. Ethan pressed the emergency button. It's happened before, but never with me inside. Perfect. My debut in corporate events and stuck elevators. He tried to contact maintenance, but there was no signal. The generator had also failed. Sophie leaned against the wall and crossed her arms. Looks like we'll be here for a while. At least the air conditioning's working, and there's nothing to eat. Terrible combo. You're hungry? I'm always hungry after 5. Survival rule from someone who once lived on 1 pack of crackers a day. Ethan looked at her again, with that mix of curiosity and admiration. You talk about things like that with such ease, because if I don't laugh, I cry. And crying won't help us get out of the elevator. He chuckled, more relaxed now. You know, I used to think women like you only existed in movies. And I used to think men like you only existed in tax reports, cold, arrogant, and soulless. Your words, not mine. They both laughed. But you know something, Ethan, she said, looking up at the ceiling. Sometimes what we think we know isn't even half the story. And are you talking about me? About me too. We protect ourselves so much, build walls, hide behind titles, behind sarcasm, and we miss what's real. He didn't say anything. Are you afraid? He asked. Of the elevator? Number. Of other things, maybe. Like what? Like letting myself feel something in a place where I was only supposed to work. He nodded slowly. I get that. More than you might think. Their eyes met. The silence that followed wasn't empty, it was full of everything they hadn't yet found the words to say. And in that metal box, stuck between floors, there was more truth than in many of those gala dinners. 30 minutes later, the elevator started moving again. When they stepped out, they walked in silence to the parking lot. Thanks for the talk, and for the company in captivity, he said. It was more fun than I expected, she replied. He hesitated for a moment, as if he wanted to say something else, but he just nodded. Good night, Sophie. Good night, Ethan. They each went their own way. Neither of them knew that, Across the city, Victoria Langley already had a file on Sophie spread across her desk and a plan in mind. The dining room at Luxor, in the heart of Manhattan, was carefully designed to impress. A piano played softly in the background, silverware sparkled under the warm chandelier light, and Caldwell Enterprises executives toasted with international investors over the close of a new round of deals. Ethan was there, elegant, tense. He wasn't a fan of social events, but he knew this night mattered, and somehow he wished Sophie were there with him. But this time, she hadn't come. He hadn't invited her. He was still processing everything they'd been through: the elevator, the conversations, and all the things they hadn't said. That's when Victoria appeared, wearing a flawless navy blue dress and the same confident sparkle in her eyes. She approached easily and took the seat beside one of the key British investors. "Mr. Harris, have you met Ethan's companion?" Victoria said casually, swirling her glass. "Oh yes," the man replied. "The young woman who presented the Horizon project. Very sharp. I was impressed." Victoria smiled. "She is impressive, isn't she? And to think she's actually his son's nanny." The words hit the center of the table like lightning. A few people exchanged glances. One waiter froze for a second before continuing to pour the wine. Ethan stared at Victoria, stunned. She went on, as if commenting on the weather. "Don't get me wrong, I admire the boldness. A nanny at the heart of strategic decision-making? It's modern, really. Though, personally, I prefer professionals with proper qualifications." "Victoria," Ethan started, but his voice faltered. Harris cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable. "She seemed well prepared to me, no matter what her current job title is." "Of course," Victoria smiled, "but maybe the board deserves to know who's really influencing the company's decisions, don't you think?" The words hung in the air. And that was exactly when Sophie appeared. She had come to drop off a signed document at Ethan's assistant's request. She wore a simple, elegant dress, nothing flashy, but enough to make her stand out. When she walked in and saw all the eyes on her and Ethan's pale expression, she felt that something was wrong. "Oh, what a coincidence," Victoria said loudly. "We were just talking about you." Sophie stopped. Steady. "I hope it was something useful." "It always is," Victoria replied. "We were just explaining to the investors that you're actually little Max's nanny." The room fell silent. Sophie took a deep breath. She didn't shrink back. She didn't flinch. She simply looked at each of their faces. "Yes, I'm a nanny, and very proud of it," she said firmly. "And before that, I was a cashier, a clerk, a waitress, a caregiver, a cleaner. But no matter the job, I always did my best." She turned to Ethan, waiting for him to say something, a gesture, a word, a sign of support. But he stayed silent, frozen, like he'd been blindsided but couldn't find the strength to respond. "I see," Sophie said, her throat tight. "Thank you for reminding me where I came from, and especially where I don't want to stay." She turned and walked out, no tears, no drama, just a dignity that left the room quiet for long seconds. Hours later, Ethan was sitting in his office, dinner long over, his mind racing. Why didn't he say anything? Why had he stayed silent when it mattered most? He closed his eyes, trying to find an answer that didn't sound like an excuse. That's when he noticed, on the side table, a craft paper folder with colored tabs. "Project Portfolio, Sophie Rivera," the cover read. He opened it. Inside were sketches, ideas, maps, charts, social action plans, community education projects, neighborhood redevelopment proposals, programs to support single mothers, all drawn by hand, with detail, with passion, old dates, things she had dreamed up before taking her first nanny job. Ethan turned each page with a heavy heart. She was so much more than he had imagined, and so much more than the world had let her show. He felt ashamed for that night, for his silence, for being too slow. The next morning, the story had already spread further. Business blogs speculated about the nanny influencing decisions at Caldwell. Some called her bold, others questioned the company's professionalism. On social media, opinions were split, but most people praised Sophie's stance. A short video of her words at the restaurant, filmed by someone there, had already racked up thousands of views. The board was on alert. "We need to control this narrative," said the communications director. "How?" Ethan asked. "By showing that the company values talent, that regardless of someone's background, we recognize their potential." Ethan stood up. "No, we need to do more than that. I need to do more than that." That same day, Sophie was packing her small suitcase in the employee apartment. She had written a thank you letter to the HR team, another for Max, full of drawings and memories, and a third, shorter one for Ethan. Thank you for believing, even if only for a little while. I don't regret what I experienced, but I need to move on. Good luck with Caldwell, and take good care of Max. He deserves the world. She was about to close the door when she heard knocking. It was Ethan. He looked different, tired, human. You really caught me off guard yesterday, he said after a moment. Welcome to the club, she replied, crossing her arms. I should have said something. I know. I was in shock, but that's no excuse. She looked at him, steady. No, it's not. He pulled the portfolio folder from his bag and held it out to her. You should be leading a team, not picking up scattered toys. I like the scattered toys. And I like you, he said plainly. She raised her eyebrows, surprised. You like a nanny? Are you sure you can handle what people will say? I like an intelligent, brave woman who stood up to a room full of powerful people with her head held high, and who even made me laugh when the elevator broke. That's what matters to me, Sophie, not what other people think. She took a deep breath. You took too long to figure that out, but I did figure it out, and I'm here now. You know what's funny? She said, picking up her suitcase. You're telling me all this just when I got a job offer in Boston, a social project. One I helped inspire without even meaning to. Ethan looked at her. Are you going to say yes? I don't know yet. What do I have to do to make you stay? She looked him in the eyes. Let me go, if that's what needs to happen. And in that moment, he understood that love, true love, doesn't hold on. It lets go. Ethan wasn't exactly sure what he was looking for when he got in his car that morning and drove to the address Sophie had left in the company's records, but something in his chest told him he needed to see her not just to apologize, but to understand who she really was and maybe, for the first time, to understand who he really was. The scenery slowly began to change. The tall buildings gave way to simpler ones, small, family-owned stores and streets where barefoot kids ran along the sidewalks. It was a modest neighborhood, but full of life, colors, voices, smells, and stories. He parked the car and took a look around, unhurried. A group of kids played near a community school. A few women chatted in front of a bakery, and around the corner, he saw a modest building painted light blue with a banner hanging over the entrance, Luz Viva Community Center. There, he saw a mural covered with children's drawings, thank you notes, and photos taped to the wall. In many of them, Sophie was smiling with other women and children, holding signs with phrases like, "Education changes lives," and "Together, we're stronger." He walked up to the entrance and was greeted by an older woman with gray hair, wearing a t-shirt with the center's logo. "Are you looking for someone?" she asked kindly. "Yes, I'm looking for Sophie Rivera," he said, feeling almost embarrassed. "Oh, Sophie." The woman's eyes lit up. She helped start this place. I know she doesn't live here anymore, but I wanted to understand more about what she did. The woman invited him inside. For nearly an hour, Ethan spoke with local residents, volunteers, and Sophie's former co-workers. He heard how she had set up tutoring programs, organized fundraising sales to buy medicine, and helped single mothers with emotional and legal support. She had done all of it with no money, just determination and compassion. She taught math in the mornings, took care of the elderly in the afternoons, and still found time to bake bread to sell at night, said one neighbor, and she never stopped smiling. One time, the school had a gas leak. No one knew what to do. She's the one who called the fire department and led the evacuation. You'd never think she was just in her 22nd, said another. Each story he heard was like a light turning on in Ethan's mind. He felt ashamed for reducing her to a role, a label, and at the same time, deeply moved by discovering a woman so whole, so much more than he had ever imagined. Before leaving, he asked to visit the house where she had lived with her sister. They took him to a small, two-story home. Sophie's sister, Mia, was sitting on the porch, studying with a notebook on her lap. She had the same bright eyes as her sister. "You must be Ethan," she said, straight to the point. He nodded, a bit surprised. "She talked about me?" "She did, a lot. But not all of it was praise. I figured," he replied with a half-smile. "She cared about you, and that's what hurt the most, because she didn't expect you to protect her from the world. She just hoped you wouldn't be part of it when it turned against her." Ethan said nothing. "I made a lot of mistakes with her. We can tell," Mia said, closing her notebook and standing up. "But if you came all the way out here, maybe there's still a chance to fix things." Back in the city, Ethan got home late in the afternoon. The first thing he saw was Max, drawing alone in the living room. The boy looked up at him with big eyes and asked simply, "Dad, where's Sophie?" Ethan knelt beside his son. "She had to go, buddy. But why?" "I like her. She told me funny bedtime stories. And she taught me how to make a heart with my hands." He showed the gesture, his eyes welling up. Ethan hugged him. "I know, Max. I like her too." "Then go get her," the boy said with total honesty. His father smiled, eyes full. Kids know things. 2 days later, Sophie received an unexpected message. Ethan was asking her to meet for coffee at the park where they used to take Max in the evenings. She hesitated. Part of her wanted to see him again. Another part still hurt, humiliated, disappointed. But curiosity and her heart spoke louder. She arrived on time, wearing jeans, a simple blouse, and her hair in a loose bun. When she saw him sitting on the bench with a box in his lap, she took a deep breath. "I brought an apple pie from your favorite bakery," he said, standing up. "So you've been digging into my life. Let's just say I went looking for answers where I should have from the start." She sat down, keeping a bit of distance. "What do you want, Ethan?" He looked at her seriously. "I want to say I'm sorry for staying silent, for judging you, for treating you like less when you were more. Took you long enough. I know. But I'm here now, and I want to show you something." He handed her a slim folder. Inside was an official document, a project approved by Caldwell's board. An expansion proposal for the Luz Viva Center, fully funded by the company. "I took your portfolio to the board. I showed them who you are and what you can do," he said. "Not only did they approve it, they wanted you to lead it." Sophie looked at the papers, stunned. "Is this for real?" "Completely. You'll be the director of the new social impact program, Full Independence. Your own team, a brand new office in New York. Anywhere you want." She took a deep breath. "This changes a lot of things. I hope it does. But it doesn't change what happened between us." Ethan lowered his eyes. "I know, but I also know that you're the only person I want to share all of this with. Work, life, fears. And Max misses you every day." She fought back the emotion. "I don't trust you anymore, Ethan." He nodded quietly. "But I want to trust you again," she said finally. "That's up to you." His eyes lit up with hope. "Then let me prove it, one day at a time. Starting now. Starting now." He held out his hand. She looked at it for a second. Then, with a slight smile, she took it. Ethan's office was quiet that morning. The large windows let in the natural light, and the city skyline looked farther away than usual. On the desk was a single light brown envelope marked with the name Sophie Rivera. He ran his fingers over the surface of the paper, hesitant. He had written that offer with help from legal, HR, even marketing. But it was more than just a job offer. It was a genuine attempt to rebuild something, to fix what he could no longer ignore. With a deep breath, he picked up his phone and sent the message, "I need to talk to you today. No games." At the agreed time, Sophie entered the Caldwell building, this time as a guest. She wore a white button-up shirt with the sleeves rolled up and dark jeans. Her hair was pulled back in a simple bun, and she carried a leather folder under her arm. Upstairs, the receptionist greeted her with a hesitant smile. Everyone knew who she was now, and everyone was talking. Ethan stood waiting when she walked in. He didn't smile or move too close. He respected her space. "Thanks for coming. Nice to hear you say please," she replied, sitting with a steady posture. "You asked me to change." "I'm trying," he said as he sat down too. "Here's the offer. I'd like you to read it before saying anything." She opened the envelope and read carefully, silently. "Social Impact Coordinator, Caldwell Enterprises, full-time contract, competitive salary, full project autonomy, freedom to choose her team, budget guaranteed." She looked up. "Looks good. But I've learned that in this company, what looks good can be just for show. Not this time. It's real. Then here are my terms." She pulled out a printed sheet from her folder. "I want complete freedom to define the areas of work, no vetoes from the board. My team will be chosen entirely by me, no one sent in to keep an eye on things. Done. Social reports won't become marketing material. I want real action, not just pretty pictures for social media." "I agree. And our relationship will be strictly professional, no lunches, no dinners, no meetings or comments outside the work environment." Ethan nodded. "I understand, and I accept." "Good. In that case, we can begin. She extended her hand. He shook it firmly. An invisible agreement of respect had just been sealed. Sophie was met with curious looks and whispers during her first few days. Some watched with admiration, others with doubt, but she wasn't fazed. She started at the ground-level meetings with employees from every department, active listening, and visits to areas of the company that had long been overlooked. She built her team with people who had also been underestimated. A brilliant intern from a Latin background, a senior analyst with a passion for inclusion, and a former public school teacher with experience in community programs. In the following weeks, Sophie led internal workshops on empathy in the workplace, launched a scholarship program for at-risk youth, and reopened partnerships with nonprofits focused on education and health. The impact was immediate. Headlines started appearing on business news sites. Caldwell Enterprises reinvents its social responsibility with new coordinator. From nanny to leader, Sophie Rivera's rise inspires change in the corporate world. Ethan watched everything from a distance. He didn't interfere, but now and then, he'd walk past the new department and see her laughing with the team, coordinating things with passion. And in that smile, there was something he recognized and missed. One afternoon, while she was planning a visit to a project in another neighborhood, Sophie was surprised by a note left on her desk. "If you have time, I'd like to go with you, just as an observer. No agenda. Ethan." She read it twice without reacting. She thought about refusing, but part of her wanted him to see not her, but what she did. The next day, he was there at the agreed time, wearing dark jeans, sneakers, and an open-collar shirt, no security, no assistant. They went together to the community where Sophie had launched her new project, helping women who were heads of households learn entrepreneurial skills. They're learning to make handmade soaps, candles, bread. Later, they'll sell them at a small market we're setting up with microloans from the company, Sophie explained. Ethan listened carefully. This is more than a program. It's independence. Exactly. When a woman has her own income, the whole home changes. It changes her children's future. "You should be in my entire board's place," he said, half joking, half admiring. She smiled but didn't reply. At the end of the day, one of the women in the program, Mrs. Elena, came over to them. "So, you're her boss?" "I'm her manager," Ethan said. "Then make sure you value this young woman. She's gold. She wasn't born rich, but she was born with a strength not many have." Ethan nodded, moved. "You're absolutely right." Sophie heard from a distance, quietly. Back at the company, the positive reports began to pile up. Caldwell's reputation improved significantly. But what was truly impressive wasn't just the better public image, it was the personal stories from people whose lives had changed. Real people, real stories. Ethan called a board meeting to share the results. "In 3 months, we've increased perceived institutional value by 18%. We've improved internal talent retention by 12%. And we've earned genuine credibility." And all of this, he looked at Sophie, seated among the senior leaders, is thanks to her. Some directors applauded. Others swallowed their pride. But they all knew this woman had changed the company. That night, Sophie was the last to leave the building. She was walking through the empty halls when she heard footsteps. Still working? It was Ethan, just finishing up the last reports for next week's presentation. "Can I walk you to the elevator?" She hesitated for a moment, then nodded. They walked in silence. Inside the elevator, he pressed the ground floor button and, looking at the panel, said, "I know you said you wanted to keep this professional, and I respect that, but I need to thank you not just for what you did for the company, but for what you did for me." She glanced at him, surprised. "Before you, I thought I was strong because I didn't get involved. Now I see that real courage is opening up, facing what hurts. You showed me that with your honesty, with your work, with the way you are." She lowered her eyes. "Ethan, I don't want to pressure you. I just wanted you to know." The door opened. She walked toward the exit, and he followed her to the sidewalk. "Thank you for not trying to convince me," she said. "That alone makes all the difference." He smiled. "I'm learning from the best. Then keep learning. Only if you stay here. For now, I am." And in that moment, with no vows or promises, something was starting again between them slowly, at the right pace. Gradually, without formal plans or rules, Sophie started going back to Ethan's house often. The reason was always the same. Max. She said it was just because she missed him. And maybe that was true. But the truth was, those visits became part of their routine, a new routine that no one dared to question. Every afternoon after work, she showed up. She carried a bag with colorful books, paper for folding crafts, and sometimes cookies she'd baked herself. Max ran to the door the moment he heard the bell. "Aunt Sophie," he shouted, hugging her legs. She laughed, knelt down, and wrapped him in her arms. "Hey there, my astronaut. Ready for another space adventure?" When the sky grew dark, Sophie would take the boy up to his room and put him to bed. She had her own special routine, brushing teeth, picking a bedtime story, and then a lullaby. Sometimes she made up the lyrics. Other times, she sang an old tune her mother had taught her when she was little. Max would fall asleep quickly, a smile on his face. Ethan, for his part, always watched from a distance. He never interrupted. He just observed and felt something in his chest he still didn't know how to name. That Friday, the house was busier than usual. Caldwell was hosting a special dinner with international partners. It was a smaller event, but an important one, to strengthen relationships and introduce the company's new social initiatives. Sophie, as the impact coordinator, had been invited officially as part of the team. She arrived in a dark blue dress, elegant and modest, cinched at the waist with a thin belt. Her hair was pulled back in a loose bun, and she wore small earrings to complete the look, nothing flashy. But when Ethan saw her, he was speechless for a moment. "Good evening," she said as she approached. "Is everything ready?" "It is now," he replied, offering his arm. "May I?" She hesitated, then took his arm. They walked in together. During dinner, Sophie was introduced to the international guests as the mind behind the initiatives that were reshaping both the image and the heart of Caldwell. She spoke clearly, with grace and ease. She explained how each project was built around the reality of the communities, how they included active listening, local autonomy, and long-term impact. The guests were visibly impressed. "It's rare to hear someone speak about business with such a human touch," one of the Spanish executives said. "You have an admirable view of the world, Miss Rivera. Thank you." But the credit also goes to the team and to a CEO who had the courage to listen. Ethan watched silently, captivated. After dinner, the guests began to say their goodbyes one by one. Soon, only a few directors remained, and they soon left as well. Sophie stayed on the balcony, enjoying the light evening breeze. Ethan walked up, holding 2 glasses sparkling water with lemon. "I figured you'd prefer that over wine," he said, handing one to her. "You guessed right," she replied, taking the glass with a small smile. They stood in silence for a moment, looking out at the city below. "You were amazing tonight," he finally said. "I just did my job." "No. You brought to life what this company was always meant to be." She turned slightly to face him. "You know, Ethan, you seem different too, in a good way, I hope, in a more genuine way, more approachable. And that's surprisingly comforting." He looked at her with a softness she hadn't seen in him before. "And you helped me see what I'd been missing," he said quietly. "Not just here, but in life." She looked away. "Don't say that like that." "Why not?" "Because it's hard not to believe you when you say it in that voice." "Then believe me, Ethan. I'm in love with you, Sophie." Silence. Cars passed in the distance, their sound muffled. The breeze was still gentle. Sophie looked into his eyes, searching for any trace of a lie, a trick. But all she saw was truth. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything." He moved closer, taking his time, and when their faces were just inches apart, it was Sophie who closed the distance. The kiss was slow, sincere, full of discovery and relief, not rushed, not forced. It felt like they had finally found what they'd both been avoiding. When they pulled apart, she still had her eyes closed, as if wanting to hold on to that moment for just one more second. "That wasn't in our agreement," she murmured, smiling. "Then I think we need a new contract," he replied, resting his forehead gently against hers. The next morning, Max was running around the living room with a wide grin. Ethan watched him, amused. "All ready, astronaut?" "Yep, but what are we doing again?" "A special mission." "Are you in?" "Always." They got into the car, and Max held a colorful, handmade envelope. "You think she'll like it?" "I'm sure of it," Ethan said, starting the engine. In the trunk, there was a small gift, wrapped in red paper. It was the start of a plan Ethan had been working on for days, a special weekend for Max and for Sophie, something just for the 3 of them, finally together, no roles, no masks, just who they really were. In the central square of the neighborhood, where Sophie had launched one of her first projects, a simple setup had been arranged: colorful tents, craft booths, cultural performances, and a small wooden stage surrounded by flowers. It was the first community day, an event organized by Sophie and her team to celebrate the progress of the social project supported by Caldwell. Children ran around wearing shirts that read, "My future starts here." Seniors sat in circles, listening to stories, and women smiled as they sold handmade goods. It was a living picture of the change she had helped create. In the middle of the square, Ethan walked with Max by his side. The boy was holding something behind his back, trying to look serious, but the sparkle in his eyes gave him away. "Do you remember our plan, astronaut?" "Yes. When you give me the signal, I'll hand over the little box, but only when you say that part." "That's right," Ethan smiled. "And don't worry, it's going to be just fine." Max nodded, then looked around, searching for Sophie. When he spotted her on stage, helping one of the organizers set up the microphones, he pointed and smiled. "She looks really pretty today, Dad. She always has. I just took too long to see it." The event opened with simple presentations, testimonies from project participants, music, and heartfelt speeches. Sophie guided everything with calm and confidence, moving through the crowd, comforting the shy, encouraging the bold. When the microphone was passed to Ethan, the room went quiet. He stepped onto the stage with a serious expression, but his eyes were shining. "Good afternoon, everyone," he began. "Today, I'm not speaking as a CEO or a businessman. I'm speaking as someone who's been changed by this community, by this project, and by one person in particular." Sophie's eyes widened, and she stopped where she was. "When I first met this woman, I was a very different person. I believed success meant control, that results came from the top down, and that emotions were just distractions." A few soft laughs spread through the audience. "She came into my life unexpectedly, first as my son's nanny, then as someone who wasn't afraid to speak her mind, someone who stood up to me, challenged me, and changed me." He paused, swallowing hard. "Sophie, you showed me that real leadership comes from the heart, that empathy isn't weakness, it's strength, that taking care of others is what really matters." He took a deep breath and looked at Max, who got the signal. The boy walked up to the stage, holding a small blue box. All eyes followed him, charmed. "Dad," Max said, handing him the box with a big smile. "Is it time?" "It is." Ethan knelt on the stage. The entire crowd went silent. "Sophie Rivera." He opened the box, revealing a pair of simple, elegant rings. "Would you change the rest of my life by saying yes?" Sophie covered her mouth. Tears were already streaming down her cheeks. Her eyes were wide and her breathing short. "Ethan, I love you, and I want to build a life with you, a real life, with Max, with our flaws, with everything we are and everything we could be." She started to laugh through the tears. "This is absolutely unexpected. I know, but it's also absolutely real. You did all this." She motioned to the setup, the event, the stage, with help from the amazing team you built. "And Max knew. He rehearsed with me. What if I had said no? Then we'd have to come up with a very sad alternate ending," he replied, making the crowd laugh. She slowly stepped down the stairs, walking up to him on the stage. She stood in front of Ethan, still on one knee, and held out her hand. "You're crazy, a little, and very stubborn. Definitely, and still, I say yes." The plaza erupted in applause. Max jumped and shouted, "She said yes!" and ran over to hug them both. Ethan slid the ring onto her finger with trembling hands, and she did the same. Then he stood and pulled her into a long, tight hug. The kiss that followed felt like the natural ending to that moment, light, real, filled with laughter and tears all at once. Meanwhile, across the city, in a sleek and dimly lit apartment, Victoria was watching the live broadcast of the event with a drink in hand. Her phone slipped slightly from her fingers as she watched the footage of Ethan kneeling on stage. "This can't be happening," she muttered, eyes fixed on the screen. In a last-ditch attempt to ruin the moment, she opened her laptop, pulled up an unfinished file with old documents and clippings about Sophie's past, and began preparing an anonymous post to stir up old controversies. But something happened before she could click publish. She saw the comment section of the live stream flood with messages. "What a beautiful love story. Never seen Mr. Caldwell smile like that. This woman changed everything. So inspiring. We need more leaders like her." Victoria slammed the laptop shut. The damage wouldn't land anymore. Public opinion was on their side, and more importantly, so was Ethan. Back at the plaza, Max ran through the booths with the flower crown he had made for my new mom. Sophie and Ethan walked hand in hand, being greeted by neighbors and team members. "Was that all really real?" she asked, eyes still wet. "As real as the project you created, as real as everything I feel for you. So we're engaged, officially. With plenty of witnesses. I have one condition already. I want a simple ceremony, with the community, with Max up at the altar, with live music and food prepared by the women from our project." "Done. Agreed. Signed." She laughed. "Are you really willing to do all this?" "I'm willing to be with you, Sophie." The breeze blew gently once more, and the sky, now golden, seemed to bless this new chapter. 3 months passed since the proposal in the square, 3 months of simple planning, meetings with the community, and decisions guided more by the heart than by any protocol. Ethan and Sophie's wedding took place on a sunny Saturday in the same place where he had knelt down, but now the square was transformed. Flower arches decorated the path among the trees, white chairs were lined up in front of a small stage, and soft music filled the air. Neighbors, co-workers, volunteers, and friends were all there, their eyes bright, their phones in hand, their smiles genuine. Max walked in, carrying a small pillow with 2 custom-made rings. He looked so neat in his little suit, he could hardly stop smiling. Ethan waited at the altar, a dark blue suit, no tie, his hair gently tousled by the wind. When some children saw him, they whispered, "He looks nervous." And they were right, but all that tension disappeared when Sophie appeared. She walked slowly, wearing a simple, elegant dress with lace at the sleeves and a flowing hem. Her hair was pinned up with flowers from the community garden. Her eyes were full of tears, and when they met his, nothing else seemed to matter. Tears fell before a single word was spoken. The officiant, visibly moved, led the ceremony with great care. The vows were shared honestly and gently, and the kiss sealed not just a marriage but the union of 2 worlds that had learned to understand each other and to heal. Married life wasn't a sudden change, but more like a natural continuation of what they were already building together. The social impact program, once limited to the city, started gaining national visibility, with Ethan and Sophie leading side by side. New centers were opened in other states, always respecting local culture and focusing on what people truly needed. Sophie organized the teams, led the training, and kept close watch over every pilot project. Her ability to listen, to care, and to transform was the driving force behind the program's success. Ethan, in turn, learned to step out of the office. He started visiting sites, joining community meetings, and sometimes even helped out himself literally. During the building of a library in a small rural town, he was seen carrying bricks and drinking coffee from a metal mug alongside the workers. The photo went viral, and the image of the CEO with the tie began to be replaced by that of the man who learned to listen. Within the company, the change was even deeper. Sophie took on a new, unofficial role, the bridge between the upper floors and the regular offices. It began with conversations in the cafeteria, then listening groups with employees, and soon she proposed a wellness committee that became part of the company's official structure. She launched mentoring programs for young talent, encouraged creative breaks, and brought in training that focused on the human side of leadership. Some executives frowned at first, but once they saw satisfaction and productivity numbers rise, they realized something was genuinely working. Ethan, now closer to everyone, was often seen walking the halls unhurried, listening to ideas, joining birthday gatherings, and having lunch at the interns' table. "That man has changed," the employees would say. But those who truly knew him understood he hadn't just changed, he had finally allowed himself to be who he had always wanted to be. Max, now more confident and happier, lived a routine full of love. His parents were at school meetings, cheering in the stands at soccer games, and always there for bedtime, the moment he looked forward to the most. Sophie kept singing her made-up lullabies, and Ethan sat by the bed, just listening. "Will you sing to me too tonight, Mommy?" he'd ask. "Only if you promise me you'll dream about the stars." "I always dream about stars, but now I dream about you two too." It was on an ordinary afternoon, during a meeting with the social impact team, that the invitation arrived, a golden envelope delivered by a discreet messenger. Inside was a letter signed by a National Committee for Sustainable Development and Social Innovation. "For your remarkable progress, cultural transformation, and the meaningful impact achieved in such a short time, we are honored to invite Mr. Ethan Caldwell and Ms. Sophie Rivera to receive the National Social Innovation Award. There would be a ceremony in Washington the following month, with media coverage and the presence of government officials, investors, and international organizations. Sophie's eyes widened. Ethan smiled, proud. "This is yours, Sophie. You're the one who built all of this. We built it together, but you're the one who taught me how to start." The next night, sitting on the porch at home, the two of them gazed up at the sky. "You know," Sophie said, resting her head on his shoulder, "I used to think happiness was something far away, a Sunday, a place, a dream. And now I think it's right here." He took her hand, holding it firmly. "And this is just the beginning." From the bedroom, Max shouted, "Are you going to come sing to me, or are you just out there being all lovey-dovey?" They laughed. "We're coming," they answered together, and they got up, ready for another ordinary night, one of those that, deep down, turns out to be the most extraordinary of all. The plane landed smoothly at Washington's airport. Outside, the sky was painted with shades of gold and blue, as if welcoming a new chapter in their story. Sophie adjusted her coat over her shoulders and looked out the window. "Can you believe that 3 months ago, you were just telling me not to be late for a gala dinner?" Ethan smiled beside her. "And now you're the star of the biggest social award in the country, and I still get nervous about interviews. Just be yourself." That's what made the world pay attention. The hotel where they stayed was elegant, but understated. Sophie had turned down anything too fancy. She preferred simple comfort over excessive luxury. In the room, Max was jumping between the beds, wearing a little tuxedo. "Can I wear this to the ceremony?" he asked, excited. "You can. Just don't wrinkle your shirt," Ethan said, trying to sound serious. Sophie finished putting on her lipstick and turned to both of them. "Ready?" "You look beautiful, Mommy," Max shouted. "And you two look amazing, my two princes." The ceremony took place in an event center with a glass ceiling and floating chandeliers. Hundreds of people from all over the country were there, community leaders, business owners, educators, and journalists. When the winners of the National Social Innovation Award were announced, the names Sophie Rivera and Ethan Caldwell echoed through the applause. Sophie stepped onto the stage with her heart racing. Ethan, holding Max's hand, followed her with a proud smile. "Good evening," she began, holding the microphone with slightly trembling hands. "If someone had told me a year ago that I'd be here tonight, I would have laughed and maybe cried too." A few soft laughs came from the audience. This story didn't begin in a think tank or a strategy room. It began with a short message, an unexpected offer, and a CEO. She looked at Ethan with a playful smile, who was a little too bossy. More laughter. But above all, it started with a challenge proving that social impact isn't charity. It's vision. It's smart planning. It's a real commitment to the people who build this country every single day. Ethan took the microphone for a moment. "And sometimes, to start a revolution, all you really need is to listen to someone you never thought you would." After the awards ceremony, the two were invited to a live interview on the event's official channel. The host, smiling, ended with one final question, her eyes full of curiosity. "Ethan, Sophie, how did the two of you meet?" They looked at each other and burst out laughing. "That's a good one," Sophie said. "Want to start?" Ethan asked. "Better if you tell it. I'll add the funny parts after." Ethan looked at the camera. "It all started when my assistant said I needed a new nanny, and he thought it would be a good idea to invite me to a gala dinner, just to impress some partners. I didn't have a better option at the time. Thanks," she replied, laughing. She accepted, reluctantly, and showed up in a red dress that stopped the whole party. Then someone mistook me for an executive. His ex-fiancé humiliated me in public. He didn't defend her. Big mistake. Phew. But from that moment on, I really started to see her. And then he offered me a contract to pretend we were dating for 2 months. They ended up married, the host added, smiling. "Sometimes, love shows up disguised as a temporary contract," Sophie said, her eyes calm. "But what's real stays," Ethan added. The host ended with a smile, thanking them for a story that was now inspiring the whole country. That same night, in the event's ballroom, the last song began to play. Soft lights filled the space, and a string quartet played an instrumental version of Can't Help Falling in Love. Ethan held out his hand to Sophie. "May I have this dance?" With pleasure, the two of them danced together, smiling and exchanging gentle looks, as if time had slowed down just for that moment. Max ran up to them, climbed onto his father's feet, and held Sophie's hand. "Can I dance with you too?" "Can he?" Sophie asked. "This dance is yours too, astronaut," Ethan said, wrapping him in a hug. And the three of them danced together, slowly, in the center of a warmly lit room. No camera flashes, no rush, no script, Just them, a family, and as they turned gently to the rhythm of the music, Sophie whispered, "This wasn't anything like I imagined." "Me neither," Ethan replied, "but it turned out better. Much better." Standing quietly at the entrance, watching from a distance, the same journalist from the interview jotted down one final note in her notebook. "Sometimes, love shows up disguised as a temporary contract, but what's real always stays."